Well, thank you very much, Chantal, for the kind introduction. Hello, bonjour. It's a pleasure to be streaming to you today from my office on the traditional territory of Coast Salish peoples, home to the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. And it's a great honor to be part of this announcement today with my colleague, the Honorable David Lametti, Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Canada. And thank you to Kukpi7 Wayne M, Tribal Chief of Shuswap Nation Tribal Council Society, for your presence for this important announcement today. And we greatly appreciate your participation, particularly at this time when your community is in a state of emergency as wildfires continue to burn in their territory. Our government has responded to calls for help and is providing military support to help combat these fires and protect residents and communities in this time of need. This natural disaster adds to what is already a very difficult time as Indigenous peoples mourn and process the identification of graves with several of our residential schools. And this is particularly heartbreaking in Tecumloops de Secwepemc First Nation as you cope with the loss of 215 children at the former Kamloops Indian Residential School. Je déplore avec la perte de cet enfant et de tous ceux qui ont été enlevés à leur communauté et ne sont jamais revenus, ainsi que la peine de ceux qui sont revenus, mais qui souffrent toujours aujourd'hui. This news shakes us to the core and drives us to do even better. It reinforces why it's so important to continue our work forward on advancing reconciliation. And this work includes and is guided by addressing the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's 94 calls to action. And we're doing this respectfully in partnership and collaboration with Indigenous peoples as we build a future where they are the drivers of their own destinies. And part of that stronger future must include space and capacity for Indigenous peoples to maintain and strengthen their distinct legal institutions. And today we're announcing a project related to the TRC's Call to Action 50, which focuses on the need for revitalizing Indigenous legal systems. And given my own background working in Aboriginal law, I'm very pleased to see this emphasis on Indigenous law. Indigenous legal traditions are deeply embedded in the social, political, economic, and spiritual institutions of Indigenous peoples. And while such law was not codified and written as European law, it is equally valid and legitimate, and one of the great challenges for our country is to reconcile the two. And so this funding today will allow the Shuswap Nation Tribal Council to build on the decade of work to revitalize its laws for the benefit of its people, now and in the future. C'est là un élément essentiel dans la démarche visant à reconnaître les droits inhérents des peuples autochtones et à promouvoir un accès accru au système de justice. And we're very fortunate to have Minister Lametti with us to talk more about this funding and how it will support the Shuswap Nation in its effort to revitalize Secwepemc laws. With that, now I'll turn the virtual podium over to you. Thank you. Merci.
Thank you, MP Weiler. Just a little reminder for those who are attending the announcement. If you are not speaking yet, please remain muted. Juste un petit rappel aux personnes qui nous joignent ce matin. Si je vous cède pas la parole, s'il vous plaît, gardez vos sourdines. Avec ça, je vais maintenant passer la parole au ministre Lametti.
Hello, bonjour. Greetings from my office, which stands on the traditional territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. Happy to join my colleague, Patrick Weiler. Thank you, Patrick, for that introduction. Happy to join Kukpi7 Wayne M to talk today about the actions our government is taking to advance reconciliation with Indigenous peoples, in this case, in the area of legal systems. I want to echo, first of all, Patrick's words of concern. Kukpi7, your community is facing some incredibly challenging times, including the unprecedented and dangerous wildfires burning in and around your territory. Know that our government stands with you at this time of emergency, and we're committed to helping protect BC communities and residents, both with respect to the fire and with respect to the health concerns that will arise inevitably as a result of that fire. At the same time, we continue to mourn the discovery of unmarked graves on the grounds of former Indian residential schools. I want to extend again my deepest condolences to all of you here in Secwepemc First Nation as you cope with the loss of 215 children at the former Kamloops Indian Residential School. As each new site is identified, and more will be identified, we cannot diminish how shocking and upsetting this is for the Indigenous communities affected, for First Nations, Inuit, and Métis throughout Canada, and for non-Indigenous Canadians as well. These images and stories are bringing to light a shocking and devastating history grounded in tragedy and oppression. Pour la première fois, de nombreux Canadiens non autochtones se heurtent aux véritables répercussions de politiques honteuses, racistes et coloniales. Ces politiques ont entraîné l'application de pouvoirs du gouvernement et des églises de façon à causer du tort aux plus innocents et aux plus vulnérables. The truly sobering part of this is that we should not be surprised. Indigenous peoples, the school survivors, their loved ones have told us these accounts for years. They have called out for help and justice in the Truth and Reconciliation's final report. I know that I cannot fully comprehend or speak to your pain, your anger, or your disappointment, but I can offer you my full commitment to walk with you on this journey of truth, reconciliation, and justice. We respect and understand that Indigenous leaders and communities know best what they need, and we are committed to bringing that support to them. We have heard from First Nations, Inuit, and Métis leaders, and any approaches we take moving forward will be Indigenous-led, will be survivor-centric, and will be culturally sensitive. And we're examining all options that fall within the justice portfolio to advance truth and justice in relation to this national tragedy. One thing all of us here know is that Indigenous cultures, languages, and traditions, your traditions, have endured despite so many efforts to render them invisible. And we're here today to celebrate your efforts to revitalize your legal traditions. This brings me hope as a minister and as a jurist, and I truly want to bring hope to you and your communities too. With today's announcement, we're taking one more step along the complex journey of reconciliation. This journey involves many travelers coming together to find healing and to forge a better way forward for Indigenous and non-Indigenous people in Canada. Guiding us along this pathway are the TRC's 94 calls to action, and many of these calls to action relate to our justice system and the need for fundamental changes to ensure true justice and equity for Indigenous peoples. Among them is Call to Action 50. CTA 50 calls upon the government to collaborate with Indigenous peoples to revitalize their legal systems and to fund Indigenous law institutes for the development, use, and understanding of Indigenous laws in accordance with the unique cultures and Indigenous peoples in Canada. Dans le budget de 2019, nous avons prévu verser 10 millions de dollars en 5 ans pour appuyer des initiatives de droits autochtones partout au Canada dans le cadre du programme juridique de partenariat et d'innovation. Ce programme vise à améliorer l'accès à la justice et à s'attaquer aux nouveaux enjeux du système de justice canadien. The first round of funding began with $500 million in 2019-20. In August 2019, the Department of Justice opened a call for proposals for a second round of funding. It sought projects that support the revitalization of Indigenous law in all regions of Canada involving First Nations, Inuit, and Métis legal traditions. On May 17th, our government announced funding of almost $9.5 million for 21 projects across the country. And today, I'm pleased to highlight one of these projects. With funding of $500,000 over 3 years, the Shuswap Nation Tribal Council Society will work to implement Secwepemc laws in the Shuswap Nation. The project, called Revitalizing Secwepemc Law through the implementation and advancement of our Indigenous legal practices, is a partnership with the University of Victoria's Indigenous Law Research Unit. Together, the Shuswap Nation and the university will develop training materials to increase community knowledge and understanding of Secwepemc traditional legal practices. Workshops and training and information sessions will help the community better understand their legal traditions and how they could be applied practically in terms of lands, natural resources, and citizenship. As well, an online database will help the Shuswap Nation store, share, and increase access to these traditional laws. Once again, $500,000. Sorry, I made a mistake on the original figures. Roughly $10 million total, and this project, $500,000. We are confident that this funding will help make a real difference for Indigenous communities doing the sometimes challenging but important work of revitalizing their legal traditions. And let me emphasize how important this is to me as a former academic and journalist. I struggled for 20 years to teach property law and to incorporate Indigenous normativity into my property law course long before it was trendy. I salute the efforts that Canadian law faculties are making to incorporate Indigenous normativity, understand Indigenous normativity, and make it part of the norm with respect to Canadian legal education. But it is critically important that we allow the reflourishing of these legal systems that have existed since time immemorial. And so it's critically important for me as Minister of Justice to support these kinds of projects, and in which not only do I believe in them, but I believe they are the only way forward for justice to be truly achieved in Canada. And so today's announcement is important to me personally. It's important to me as minister. It's important to me as an academic or former academic. And it is part of a number of concrete actions that we're taking to advance reconciliation. We recently reached a significant milestone in our work with the royal assent for the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples Act, which will serve as a roadmap to advance the implementation of the declaration at the federal level. It's our intention that this collaborative work focus on supporting Indigenous people in exercising their right to self-determination. La feuille de route traite également des objectifs de l'appel de l'action numéro 50 et du droit des peuples autochtones de maintenir et de renforcer leurs institutions juridiques distinctes. And we'll continue to work with our partners at Crown Indigenous Relations and Northern Affairs in negotiations for administration of justice agreements with a number of Indigenous communities. This responds directly to Call to Action 42 for federal and provincial governments to recognize and implement Aboriginal justice systems. Budget 2021, the Government of Canada also announced investments of $18 million over 5 years and $4 million ongoing to revive the Law Commission of Canada. This will support, amongst other things, the work to address systemic barriers in the justice system, including barriers to justice faced by Indigenous peoples. So the funding we're announcing today will add to our reconciliation efforts to support Indigenous communities and to build a new path forward that focuses on the needs of diverse peoples and communities. Kukpi7 thank you. Merci.
Merci beaucoup, Ministre Lametti. Maintenant, il va tourner la parole. Chief Christine, the floor is yours. You might be muted. Oh, there you go.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My Indian name is Big Voice that Speaks the Truth. And Kukpi7 I'm the chief of the people of Secwepemc of the Secwepemc Nation. I am also one of the tribal chiefs of the Secwepemc Nation. That is 15,000 people and a territory of 180,000 square kilometers. And right now, our house is burning. Our ranches are burning. It's a repetition of 2017. And unfortunately, we still have the same experience where we're invisible in the process. And we're trying to rectify that. We're meeting with ministers federally and provincially and doing those things that are important. I welcome this announcement at this time because for us as Secwepemc people, we understand very clearly that the foundation of who we are is embedded in Secwepemc gene, and what's in our language is our law. And it's really important part of the process. You know, when we speak about Secwepemc legal traditions, it in fact comes from our language. We have been working with the University of Victoria for a number of years now. The first one we took on was related to Simamouth, or our children, because again, we really believe that, we really truly believe when we say the children are our future, we have that belief. And now it's even more important when we see with the 215 revealing themselves to the world about the atrocities that our ancestors, my mother, my grandparents suffered, and others survivors. I don't call them survivors, I call them veterans of this war against our children. And so it's important to understand we started there. And with the University of Victoria and the research unit, starting with the language, identifying all those terms related to children and what we needed to do. And then looking at our stories, our oral history, because in our oral history is embedded, our laws are embedded in there. That's where we started. Then we went to land and resources and did the same type of process. You know, the engagement with children, elders, councils, everybody. And that kind of a process, and we developed that process. And the third one we're working on right now is citizenship, or what people would know as membership, because it's important to understand the relationship we have with each other. So in this journey for us, it's you know, the University of Victoria, now the federal government has come on board with us. And we don't think of it as a revitalization, it's more of a reconstruction. And it's not reconciliation, because reconciliation, you know, so it's bandied around so much. It's a reconstruction of who we are as a people. And it's our laws. You know, we have legal traditions. We do know and understand that we actually had Indian courts. We had our own jails. We had our own police. We had our own process for sentencing. And that was right up until the imposition of white law on us. And then it was all taken away. So we had those things. It's not like we didn't. People think we're a lawless, savage people, and that's not true. Our people were very highly organized and had legal processes looking after each other. And I think that's what's really important in this process. So this project gives us the ability to go beyond research and go into the whole process of how do we reconstruct after 150 years of genocide and assimilation, and how do we reconstruct ourselves in a good way? And I think that that's really what this is about. And we appreciate working with the government, because we see it as it's got to be done in partnership. You know, one of the things that our ancestral leaders said in 1910 in the Wilfrid Laurier Memorial, they talk about standing each other up to be great and good. We treat each other as equals and share in everything 50-50. And that whole concept is still with us today, even after what we've suffered over 150 years. We have not deviated from that principle of coexistence. It's who we are as a people. That's why we survived for 10,000 years, is we work with people, that whole concept. And what it is in the language, it's a term that it's called Kanukantuak, and translation is helping each other. Now, our language is very verb-based, it's action-oriented. And that's one of our foundational laws, actually, is Kanukantuak, helping each other. That's why when the settlers came over and the overlanders came into our territory, we helped them. That was our law. We helped people that came into our territories. We didn't, you know, do other things we could have done, but we didn't, because we respect the humanity and humans. And I think that's what people need to understand. Our law is that deeply embedded. And today, you know, people say maybe we don't practice, but that's not true. Kanukantuak is helping each other. My son just recently was working with his cousin that was having problems with his son, and he intervened and he helped his cousin look after that little boy. That's Kanukantuak. And he just did it. He didn't ask anybody. That's Secwepemc law in action. That's what people forget. They think it's way back there. It's not. It's right here, right now. So this process will solidify as we move forward. And our language, along with the law, looking at a Secwepemc Law and Language Institute that is, you know, and this is sort of going to foundation for that. And so we do appreciate the working alongside the federal government as we move forward. And this era of reconstruction, I would call it, not an era of reconciliation. We're beyond that. We need to reconstruct who we are as a people and how we can embed, our legal traditions as part of the process. Legal pluralism, as Minister Lametti said, it's really important. So we welcome this opportunity to move forward. And, to the government, to the member of parliament, to the minister and all your staff, the prime minister, the other ministers, we appreciate this opportunity because it will begin a process of reconstruction that we won't see in our lifetime, but 150 years from now, 100 years from now, there'll be a time people will look back at this time in history saying these children showed themselves and the response was, let's help the people rebuild themselves. We took everything from them when we took the children. We took the language, we took the laws, we took the land, we took everything. Let's help reconstruct who they are as a people and the humanity that our people have. And I think that's what's important because the implementation of UNDRIP is critical. And as we were talking earlier, is that when they did the AJAX process, where there was a panel, an Indigenous Secwepemc panel and a non-Indigenous scientist that came together. And the concept is one we understand very clearly of coexistence, but it's walking on two legs, where we use Western knowledge and our own Secwepemc knowledge to work together to find a solution. And that's the essence of free, prior, and informed consent. And that's what we see this moving forward. And I really do appreciate this opportunity, Minister, Member of Parliament, for the Sunshine Coast, where it's not smoky, but I do appreciate this opportunity. And on behalf of the Secwepemc, Kukpi, the chiefs, the people of the council, and our people, like I said, we look back on this in the future, and it's a time where things started to change, and in this horrific time for our people, the grief and loss, it's hard for, I think, people to imagine where people are suffering at this time at many different levels. And with the forests and the land being destroyed as it is, it makes it even more horrific because the land is what we use to heal ourselves. And if we can't go to the land and it's not there in that way anymore, the grief and loss we have associated, because there's thousands of years of us using this land. And so I think that it compounds, it's compound trauma, I call it. And we're working through it. And I think that this is an example of us looking at something in the positive and reconstruct who we are and working in partnership and in collaboration with the federal government. So again, thank you to the government and to all your staff that I know that does all the work. They're online. Thank them. So, Kukpi7.
Thank you, Chief Wayne Christian. And now I will invite those in the media that would like to ask a question to please raise their hands if they are with us here virtually, or if you're joining us by the phone, please use *6 to raise your hand to ask a question. As always, you will have one question and one follow-up. Maintenant, je vais prendre ce moment pour inviter aux médias à nous rejoindre. Un petit rappel, c'est une question puis un suivi. S'il te plaît, utilisez la fonction lever la main si vous avez une question. Et pour ceux qui veulent nous rejoindre par téléphone, utilisez les boutons de *6 pour lever votre main. Donc, je vais juste attendre une minute pour ceux qui voudront utiliser la fonction. I'll just hold a moment to allow those that are raising their hand to do so at this time. It looks like we have no media questions today. On n'a pas de questions des médias aujourd'hui, donc je veux vous remercier beaucoup à nous rejoindre aujourd'hui. Thank you very much for joining us on this very important announcement.